Good evening. It seems that the dragon and the elephant are headed for a showdown, and this time the battle will be fought over high seas, the South China Sea to be precise. In an aggressive move, China has put up a Vietnamese petroleum block currently under exploration by an Indian oil firm up for global bidding. While the move was meant to counter a Vietnamese legislation asserting the country's control over offshore areas and islands, which Beijing considers disputed, it has put New Delhi in a spot as Vietnam is now keen that India does not vacate this block. India and China have in the past discussed the South China Sea dispute threadbare and have always maintained that the dialogue is only way past disputes. But the latest development has strained not only Indo-China but also Sino-Vietnamese ties, as Hanoi is now keen that India digs in its heels. So for the first time, India has gone beyond its call for freedom of navigation line and has demanded access to resources in accordance with principles of international law. This shift in stand has been largely provoked by the Chinese decision to bid out a block already given to India. The block numbered 128, which has been contracted to ONGC Videsh Limited, or OVL, was part of the 9 petroleum blocks that were placed for global bidding by China Offshore Oil Corporation last month. Over the past few weeks, the blocks put up for bidding were compared to existing blocks already given out by Vietnam in the same area. Tonight on The Big Picture, we'll discuss the potential diplomatic row taking shape, and we'll also discuss how this almost hegemonic move by China could affect Sino-Indian relations in the near future. And joining me in the studio tonight will be TCA Rangachary, former diplomat, as well as Professor Deepak from JNU. In just a little while, we'll also be joined by Pramit Chaudhry, Foreign Affairs Editor of the Hindustan Times, as well as Bijoy Das, who's a research fellow in IDSA. But I'd like to start the show, however, with Professor Deepak, if I could. Now, sir, OVL has decided to exit the blocks. They already decided to exit the blocks a couple of months ago because it had failed to start drilling activity on time. On its part, OVL maintains that its surveys had shown not much promise for any big finds. Now, despite the fact that OVL has decided to exit, this is still a hegemonic move by China in its own backyard, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think hegemonic, according to my perception, it will be a little, a stronger vocabulary, Of course, China has asserted sovereignty in South China Sea, and it said that since ancient times, these are our parts. But I think as regards this particular, block to be auctioned.
And block 128,
yeah, 128, yeah. Block 128. In fact, it has been, the bidding papers China invited bids, in June this year. But I think primarily it wanted to show or assert its sovereignty, that's what it claims. And moreover, the Vietnam, it has also claimed, and it has the de jure sovereignty, in this area. I think as regards the Indian policy, I being a researcher of India-China, relations and Chinese studies, I think the policy is slightly incoherent. Because first, we have accepted the de jure sovereignty of Vietnam in this block. And secondly, we changed our policy a little bit, and we said that, we are primarily there because of the economic reasons. And thirdly, now we are again, taking side with the Vietnam that this is an issue which should be resolved bilaterally, but in accordance with the international law. And I think here, I think we are, a little bit fishing in the troubled water, if I may say that, because China has asserted that this is one of the core interest area, core area of China. That means it has equated South China Sea with those of Tibet and even Taiwan, where China doesn't accept any kind of interference, for from other countries.
Right. Let me go to Mr. Rangachary for a bit now. So, if you look at the ASEAN meet that happened recently in Cambodia, all indications point to the fact that China used its clout, first of all, and its aggressive assertiveness to lean on the host nation, that was Cambodia, and got it to declare that the dispute was bilateral and should not be discussed in multilateral events like this. New Delhi now, sir, has a crucial decision to take on how to tackle this. What line of action should we take? What line of action do you see New Delhi taking at all, if at all?
I think we are looking at several different questions here. Let me start with the one that you raised about the ASEAN meet. this year ASEAN has said something, last year they had said something else. Now the question is, does what they said this year supersede what they said last year? Or is this simply because of the fact of the changed circumstances that they have said what they have said without in any way invalidating what was said last year in the ASEAN summit, which was hosted in Hanoi? The basic point is that there is a bilateral approach, there is a multilateral approach. Now, it's not only Vietnam which is affected by the Chinese claims. There are several other countries in the region also having claims in South China Sea, including small countries like Brunei.
Right.
Now, naturally, a country in a position like China would prefer bilateral negotiations, because then it is not possible for all these small countries to get together and use whatever influence they have together in order to exert pressure on China to take a certain position. That does not suit all of the countries involved, and even though they might have gone along with the declaration made in the ASEAN meet, these countries will continue to have a position which will be at variance with what China has taken. Earlier on, we were talking about the way in which China is asserting its claims, sovereignty, and so on. You know, there are many different models around the world, if you look at it, where you can utilize the resources of a particular area without necessarily going into the sovereignty question. For example, the North Sea oil. Now, there are a number of countries which have jurisdiction, and yet they're all sharing the resources that are coming out. And that is a solution that ASEAN countries, China, all the countries involved in this discussion could look at.
Right.
There's another question about the bids, inviting bids with the China National Oil Company, is that would foreign companies consider it prudent to go and bid for a site which might turn out to be a disputed site and therefore lock them up in litigation of one kind and another. So there are a number of different issues that we are talking about here.
Right.
And to what extent the Chinese will follow through in asserting their claims is again something that is a point that could be discussed.
Point taken, sir. We'll take a small break right now. We'll come back and there's lots more to discuss on this topic. Pramit Chaudhry will join us just after the break. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to come on The Big Picture tonight. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture, and joining us now is Bijoy Das, research fellow with IDSA. He's just back from China. Let's ask you, Bijoy, what do you make of this move by China, putting these blocks out for global bidding? You've just returned from China. Your particular insight on this particular move?
The primary reason why China is doing this is not energy, as far as I see it. It's because the primary reason is sovereignty of the territory. And what it signals today is that as far as the territory is concerned, it's non-negotiable. It's absolutely Chinese territory. But a section of China is open to the possibility of shared exploration on the basis of EEZ, exclusive economic zone. That it is open to, but not on the issue of sharing the territory. Number one. Number two is we also have to look at the general Chinese tactic which it employs, whether be it Senkaku or be it Scarborough Shoal or Spratlys. First, the other disputing party, whether it's Japan or Philippines or Vietnam or others, they generally bar their fishermen or other people from entering and exploring the disputed area, but China doesn't. And there is reason to believe that there is a tacit encouragement from the Chinese authorities for its people to go fish over there. And once that happens, there is a diplomatic row, and then it eventually ends up with the Chinese, there is a lot of belligerence on the media by the statements, and it applies trade sanctions. In case of Japan, it was rare earth minerals. In case of Philippines, in Scarborough, it was bananas and tourism. And thereafter, there is every possibility that the other disputing party, because it's a smaller one, it backs down, and if it doesn't, China sends its forces.
So there's a pattern here that China is following right now.
It does.
And if I can ask you this as a follow-up, Vietnam seems to be digging in its heels as well. They want India to do the same as well. They want OVL to explore that particular oil block as well. Do you see Vietnam this time around not backing down and perhaps giving China a run for its money?
It is possible, but Vietnam, I guess, is pretty sure that what it can and what it cannot. At this point of time, I guess Vietnam, they are looking for support from players like US, from India, big countries, without whose support it cannot stand.
Right. I got my answer there. Let me go to Pramit Chaudhry really quickly. Now, the People's Daily of China, we all know it is particularly a party mouthpiece there. Big banner headline says, provocative neighbors disgrace themselves. Interestingly, India is not mentioned by name. They mention Japan, they mention Vietnam, in fact, as well, and the Philippines as aggressors, but not India. Now, India is not mentioned by name. Is there any chance, Pramit, that China sees it as a backyard dispute with Vietnam and Japan and does not really want India to have a dog in this particular fight?
Well, I think the Chinese don't believe we do have a dog in this fight, because the South China Sea, we don't have any territorial claim. We have a claim on, we have an agreement to explore a portion of the seabed, and only one of the blocks that OVL has actually enters a territorial claim of China. And the Chinese believe, probably correctly, that it's Petro-Vietnam is the dominant partner and OVL is a junior partner. So India is a very small finger of an extension of Indian interest in the South China Sea. We don't have any naval bases there. We have no standing armed position and so on. And the Chinese, so far, if you looked at it, they got into run-ins with India on the Kashmir visa issue and a few other points in the past 4 or 5 years. In the past 2 years, at least, and definitely since Wen Jiabao's visit here, they've been rolling back on India and saying basically we're not really interested in getting into a squabble with India. And the focus now has been those 3 countries that you've mentioned, Philippines, Vietnam, and Japan.
Right.
And one school of thinking is that the Chinese concluded that over the past 5 or 6 years, they actually got into too many squabbles. They got into a squabble with almost every one of their neighbors. Even Mongolia, a country otherwise quite quiescent about China, got angry at them. And they seem to have then concluded that they're really getting into too many squabbles. And curiously, one of the groups that pushed for this is the PLA itself, the People's Liberation Army, believed that the Chinese system had gotten too many of its neighbors angry with it, and it was getting into some unnecessary squabbles. And the focus, therefore, is South China Sea and Japan over the islands that have been mentioned, because there are direct territorial disputes for which China believes that it has complete sovereignty.
Fair point. Professor Deepak, like Pramit Pal just mentioned, India doesn't really have a dog in this fight per se. Our ships don't usually go there. There's no naval movement as well. But half the world's commercial shipping passes through the South China Sea. 5 trillion a year, and the US warships regularly cruise through the region, transit the region on their way from to and from the Persian Gulf, Southwest Asia, and in the Indian Ocean. So far, Professor Deepak, the US is choosing to stay out of this debate, hoping that one of China's increasingly frustrated neighbors might pick up the gauntlet. And how long do you see America staying out of it? They've reiterated time and again that navigational and exploratory freedom in the South China Sea is high priority for them. How long do you see them staying out of this?
No, I think this is a very good question. How long Americans going to stay out of this conflict? I think their strategy is to support the claims of the smaller country for sovereignty in this region, but not to be the party of the dispute. And they have shown their neutrality, so far. And India has somewhat taken ambiguous position, as I reiterated, a little while back. While it supports the U.S. Statement of, freedom of navigation and, protecting the lanes of communication and so on and so forth. But why it is a little ambiguous, because I think it has, to some extent taken the sides with the Vietnam, which is very, very clear, from our statements. But of late, I think India has readjusted its a little bit, a policy a little bit for the better. That is almost tantamount to the Chinese policy in our occupied in POK, whereby China says that this is a bilateral issue and it should be resolved bilaterally, and India has, readjusted to the same tune that the territorial dispute should be resolved bilaterally, but our exploration and other economic activity should go unhindered.
The same question, sir, I asked Pramit Pal. I'll give you a slightly different version of it. Now, Japan reportedly is not happy with China. It's increasing aggression on high seas. And the fact is that Japan remains a powerful naval country, despite whatever's happening with the economy. You think China's biggest worry, like Pramit perhaps pointed out, at this point should be angering Japan rather than, India, for that matter?
Well, first, let us first agree and grant that the Chinese, like most others, are reasonable people. If so, they will also make a cost-benefit analysis. And if we make a similar kind of a cost-benefit analysis, does it suit China's purposes? In China's own larger interest to pick a fight at this stage, their party congress is going to take place in October this year. There's going to be a change of leadership. By the time the new leadership settles down, it might well be another year. And as happens in every country, the new leadership takes time to set its own policy directions and to start assessing whether it wants to make any changes from the past and so on. And then insofar as the smaller countries are concerned, if the Chinese were to take any action to enforce, so far, what we have heard is assertion of claims, whether it is sovereignty or territoriality or whatever. It's assertion of claims. But in pursuit of those claims, if the Chinese decide that they are going to take specific action, and if that action happens to be directed against one or the other smaller countries in the neighborhood, then what is the message China will be sending to the rest of the neighborhood? And how does it serve China's political interests, economic interests, and so on? So when you look at it from that point of view, I think perhaps what we are looking at in the coming 2, 3, 4, 5 years is that while China will continue to be You can use the word if you want aggressive or assertive, whatever word you want to use. In terms of the position that it takes publicly, it does not necessarily mean that they would take follow-up action in order to actually take to the logical conclusion. If you assert a claim, then the logical conclusion would be that you must go ahead and enforce it.
Did you agree with that, what Mr. Rangachary just said? Is that going to be China's strategy 2-3 years from now?
I'll draw your attention to the recent Chinese move which has been made. According to Chinese map, this area is divided into 3 archipelagos. One is Xisha, one is Zhongsha, and is Nansha. Now, Xisha is what we call as Paracel, Nansha is what we call as Spratleys,
Islands,
and Zhongsha is part of, Scarborough is part of it. Now, this was earlier, according to Chinese administration, was under Hainan, which is a South China island. Now, after this spat, Scarborough and the ongoing with the Vietnam, what China has done it has removed this area from the jurisdiction of Hainan, and it has established a city, is going to establish a city called Sansha in an island called Yongxing Island, which is in Paracel Group of Islands. The building of the city government is already up, if it is to be believed. And all the jurisdiction of these 3 groups of islands will be under that city government.
Right.
So what does it say? Is it not the forward movement?
It means China is moving quickly and really, really fast. Last word on the show.
Asserting its right.
I'm almost out of time. Last word, 20 seconds or less, Pramit. How does India handle this now? How should India handle this now? Very, very briefly.
So we don't have a military position really to stand on in this. And I think what we're doing right now, which is that OVL is basically staying there, and by basically forming commercial alliances with Petro-Vietnam, it's very clear that India is therefore doing what it can commercially and politically to support its standing line, which is that the South China Sea is international waters. It's not going beyond that, and I don't think the Chinese, as you've mentioned, the Chinese themselves don't see India as being necessarily a provocative player. And I think for the time being, as far as the international game in South China Sea is concerned, that's fair as far as India can really go right now.
Thank you so much, all my guests. I must thank all my guests before I leave. Pramit Pal Chaudhry, thank you so much for joining us. Professor Deepak, TC Rangachary, as well as Bijoy Das, thank you all for being on The Big Picture. Of course, like my guest today said, perhaps there is a feeling in China that they don't want India to have a dog in the fight. Really, their bigger concerns are perhaps Japan, the smaller countries surrounding the South China Sea like Vietnam and Philippines, and also the US to some extent. That's all the time we have on The Big Picture tonight. Next time, till we get you another edition of The Big Picture with another hot topic, this is Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.